Welcome to the Brain Gain Youngstown Leadership Series podcast. Each week, we'll learn from leaders who are driving change and making an impact. Now here's your host, the CEO of the Youngstown Publishing Company, Jeff Leo Herrmann.
I got the courage in me. Let go and let it release. Don't stop from feeling it. It's time for me to break the stone.
Today on the Brain Gain Youngstown Leadership Series podcast, I have the extra special pleasure of introducing an extra special guest. It's President Jim Tressel from the Youngstown State University. We heard some great stories about fourth grade entrepreneurship and the leadership lessons he's learned over the course of his career. So please, without further ado, here is President Jim Tressel. President Tressel, thank you so much for joining us today on the Brain Gain Youngstown Leadership Podcast.
My pleasure, Jeff. It's beautiful to be outside and
Isn't it?
And have a chance just to, whether it's listeners or viewers, have a chance just to talk about the big picture.
Right, exactly. Yeah, really with a focus on workforce development and entrepreneurship and what we can do to help drive impact here in our regional economy. So the goal today, you literally wrote a book on leadership, literally, and so we wanted to delve deeper and maybe start with more personal stories. So to start off with, what did you want to do when you were growing up? As a child, what did you dream or aspire to do?
I think when you're a child, you don't think very far out.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to emulate what I saw, which I saw a household that worked extremely hard, that was innovative in its own way, service-oriented, for sure. And so I guess the definition of child is when you're really young, and probably my first entrepreneurial activity was in fourth grade. I said, I'm gonna get a paper route.
Right.
And I'm gonna go and I'm gonna work. I see my mom and dad get up in the morning, and whether it's my dad heading to the office or my mom heading to serve someone in the community, they start early in the morning and they serve people all day long, and I thought, well, I've got to go to school, so I'm going to have to find a couple hours before school, to begin my entrepreneurial thing. So back in the old days, they had a paper in Cleveland called the Cleveland Press, and then that was the afternoon paper. So when I was like in fourth grade, fifth grade, I delivered the afternoon paper.
Walking or biking?
Bike, oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah?
Bike
And
baskets.
develop the arm?
No, we wanted to make sure we went up and put it right where they wanted it, because you wanted a good tip at Christmas.
Right, there
so
you
you
go.
didn't want to throw the paper around. But after 2 years of being an afternoon person, then all of a sudden I'm in junior high and I've got activities after school. So I moved to the morning, which was the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and from about, I guess, 6th through 12th grade, I kept that job knowing that, I could work before school and, be entrepreneurial, and I always liked to have a couple bucks in my pocket.
Right.
And my parents weren't going to give me any money. That wasn't the way they did things.
Right.
And, so just learned that spirit of, wanting to work.
Now, did that maybe encourage a fascination in journalism and storytelling and relationships, or did it happen to be that was just a good job to have when you were that
I
age?
think it was just the job that was available. Once I became old enough, I was working at the Breer Rec department and, doing, whatever job, delivering pizzas on the side or whatever. I guess the message I would say to the listeners, viewers, whomever, is that it's all about work.
Right.
Right. And sometimes I get concerned that people don't understand that the work comes before the what did you dream of wanting to do. You better learn how to work. You better learn how to solve problems. You better learn how to manage your time. You better learn a lot of fundamental things that really might have nothing to do with what it is you want to do.
Right.
But are you going to prepare and get yourself good enough to be able to go do what you want? Everyone wants to be whatever, but have you created your fundamentals so that you have a chance to go see if you can be that whatever?
Right. And you learned at an early age that wherever you placed the paper had a direct influence on your tip at Christmas, correct?
Absolutely. And you know what? I think just innately I was a people pleaser,
Right.
and I wanted my customers to not be disappointed that their paper was wet when it rained, at 7 o'clock and they weren't up yet, but had been sitting there since 5:30. I wanted to do a good job, and when you're in the newspaper business like I was, there was feedback.
Right.
I mean, they were mad if it was late, or they were mad if it was wet, if I didn't do what was expected, and so I guess I didn't know that I was developing the fundamentals. I just knew that I had X number of hours in the day, and why not utilize them, to grow.
Right. Now, was there a leader you looked up to? So as you developed your career at an early age, was there someone you aspired to be, or someone you looked up to that you modeled? Were they a local figure, a national figure, a parent, a teacher, someone inspirational in your life?
I think, fortunately, I had really great parents. And, we talk about what are the voids in our society right now that might be causing some of the biggest problems, and everyone wants to debate what they think is a systemic problem. In my mind, the biggest systemic problem is the parenting void.
Right.
And so I was fortunate. I had a hardworking, selfless set of parents. I had 2 older siblings who were hardworking, great models, and I read once somewhere where someone said the only way that the human is capable of truly learning is through example. And I had example.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked up to my older brothers. I didn't necessarily want to be just like them, but I liked what they were doing. I think as time went on and late in my high school career, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My guidance counselor thought I should be an engineer because I had good math scores.
Right.
But I didn't even know what an engineer did. I thought it was the guy that drove the railroad car. I mean, I didn't know what an engineer was. And when I started looking into it, I thought, well, that's instinctively not that interesting to me. Then I looked at my oldest brother, who was just graduating from college and going into education and going into coaching. My middle brother was majoring in education. My father was an educator. I saw the impact he made on others. My mom went back to college when we got older, and she was working part-time at the College of Education. And so I think it was at that point, late in my high school career, maybe my senior year, where I had to start making a decision what's next. When you're a 10th grader, what's next is 11th grade.
Right.
What's next is you're on the varsity rather than the JV, or you're the officer in the chemistry club instead of just being in the club. But all of a sudden you're a senior, and they're not going to let you stay any longer. You got to decide what you want to do, and that's when I really decided that I thought I wanted to go into education.
Right. Do you think we as a community do a good job of helping students make decisions or see a potential path, or do you think there's a lot of opportunity for development there?
I think it goes back a little bit to that modeling or the example thing.
Mm-hmm.
I run into buddies who are really good with fixing things. Well, chances are they grew up with a dad or a grandpa or an uncle who showed them how to fix things.
Right.
I mean, I think I would have been capable. I'm terrible at it. It's one of the things I'd love to learn to do. It's one of the things I told my son. I said, hey, you're going to learn to work with wood, because I watched my grandpa, and he just loved doing that. My dad didn't. He was an educator. He loved coaching. You can do that, forever. And now it's something. My son's 41 years old, and one Saturday a month, we get together in the workshop, and it's like the best Saturday of the month.
Great.
I'm still no good. I hold the other end.
Right.
I try to learn, but he's really good at it. And, so I think it goes back to that, do we do a good job modeling at home?
Mm-hmm.
The group I worry most for is the ones that don't have an example at home. Can we fill the gap in education? We're working very hard. We have our fingers crossed that within the next year we're going to have an imagination center that will be great for our students, but I'm hoping it'll be great for the community to have that kid come in who doesn't have anyone modeling for them, and maybe he or she can learn how to use a 3D printer or a laser printer or an industrial strength sewing machine or a wood shop, and maybe prototype something they've thought about, but no one has any equipment in their garage.
Right.
You know, and so can we fill that gap? To me, that's the biggest challenge I think we have, is can we fill the gap with the lack of models and examples we have for our youth? That's my biggest worry.
Right. And do you think that can be impacted on a local level, or are there national or global initiatives that, or the aspirations too lofty that this literally is a grassroots, boots on the ground type of initiative we have to do?
You know, maybe you can get some funding that conceptually believes that we need more modeling and examples and more opportunities and more imagination centers and those kinds of things. But I'm not a real believer in you count on someone else to do it for you. You know, you got to go figure it out yourself as a community, first as a family,
right.
If not as a family, maybe as a school system, maybe as a community. But, you know, as soon as you start wanting the government or whomever to do everything for you, I think you're heading down the wrong path.
Right, right. Is there, so the university is playing a role trying to fill that gap, and will there be opportunities for everyone to get involved in that?
Well, you know, we're hoping so. Our mission really is pretty simple. First and foremost, it's the futures of our students. Mm-hmm. The ones who have invested in saying, hey, I'm going to come here because I think I can get catapulted into where I want to go. So that's our first mission, and we have to keep that in mind. Our second mission is making sure we have academic quality, distinction, and that whole discovery of knowledge on the research side in areas where we can invest. We can't do it everywhere, and so that's really one of the real focuses. And then the third one is what impact can we make in our region?
Right.
And that's where we can reach back into the community. Our College of Education, with their Project Pass and their reading things and all of the things they do with after-school programs and all the support they give Success After 6 and, you know, the community school, and our people are out there, the number of hours, just our honors college, between 50 and 70,000 community service hours a year just from our honor students. So that impact is important for us. In the imagination side of things, the making things, we've always been dreaming about creating that venue that's probably not going to touch 1,000 kids a year, but could we touch, you know, 50 to 100 kids a year that might all of a sudden say, hey, I'd like to learn more about that. Again, it's got to fit into our total mission, but it's certainly a part of our mission.
Right, right. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about your leadership style and your leadership philosophy, and especially how it's changed over time. Has it evolved over time, or does this go back to kind of the core fundamentals or core principles?
You know, I think like anything, something gets developed. So I don't know that you're 22 years old and you understand leadership. Sometimes you have to go stumble into responsibility.
Right.
And then you learn, you know, what's effective, what's not effective. I've always been a believer that you can't experience everything and learn everything, therefore you should read about and listen and watch, and that's the beauty of today. You don't have to go to the library and get a book. I mean, everyone's got devices. I mean, whether it's podcasts or YouTubes, or there is so much information. So I've always believed that if you want to develop something, if you want to learn how to work with wood, there's YouTubes to teach you how to do that. Well, you want to work on leadership, there's places, you know, that you can reach out. You need that combination of experiences, though, because I guess theoretic and what someone else did is one thing, but what fits you best is another. So I think the evolution that I've seen in my own leadership life is that I've grown to really understand more completely that listening is maybe the biggest part of leadership. Asking for input is huge in leadership. Challenging people is huge in leadership. You know, so often anecdotal things come up. Everyone says, we ought to do this. And this is, you know, well, I'm a real believer in data. You know,
Right.
When I was coaching, I'd say, hey, show me the video. Don't get on the board and say we ought to run this play because of this or that. Show me, you know, how it's effective.
Right.
Has someone else done it well? Do we have the people who are capable of doing that? And so that constant dialogue, but challenging people to prove why they want to do something, I think is critical.
Right, and challenging in a pragmatic or rational way, right? So are you the type that would pound the table and completely run with your gut, or is it based upon data and...
No, I was always a big data guy.
Yeah.
Just because I knew that when I was coaching, there was real simple data. How many games did you win and how many did you lose? I mean, you didn't have to get a computer to figure it out, okay? And then when you drilled down, there was very simple data in the science of that game. You know, data analytics, everyone talks about that being new. Data analytics aren't new. If you were effective in what you were doing, you always did that. And so conversational discussions of why we should do it, what's the data behind it, what's the proof behind it. People would ask often, how did you guys have so many good teams? What was one of the secrets? And I always responded that our staff always did a great job of figuring out what our people could do, where were their strong suits, and that's what they asked them to do.
Right.
It's harder at a university because there's not 100 guys, you know, there's 1,500 employees and 12,000 students, and everyone's got a great idea and everyone's passion is their passion. And so figuring out what we can do as a university has been a fun thing. It's been tough because resources are scarce, you know, all those different things. But to me, that's the magic, is what can your people do, what's needed, you know, what's needed out there. And now let's see if we can put our resources, time, treasures in that direction.
Right, the essence of strategy is knowing what not to do.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes, right?
Yep.
So how do you handle that diverse set of stakeholders? And this goes to you currently as the president of the university, parents that wanted their player to get more touches. Like,
Sure.
how do you handle that diverse set of stakeholders?
Well, communication is really critical. Communication is difficult because sometimes communication isn't effective if it's not the communication one wants to hear or follow up on. There's disappointment in decision making. That's one of the hard parts. I think many people who are fortunate to be in a leadership role or a service role, serving a group, unfortunately have to be thrust into a situation where sometimes people are disappointed. Johnny's not getting in the game as much. Johnny needs to know why. Johnny needs to know what it will take to get in the game, okay? But Johnny or Johnny's parents can't be blind to the fact that Johnny deserves to be in the game. And I think in society, we've gotten a little focused on what we think Johnny or Susie deserve, and versus what do Johnny or Susie, what have they earned? And it makes it more difficult, you know, as a leader.
Is there a role, I see this in 8U baseball. You know, everyone wants to hit the home run, everyone wants to be fourth, and, you know. Is there a role that youth sports can play in better developing leadership skills and coaching not only the player development, but the parents? Because I think that is definitely a big issue with parents getting over their skis around what the potential is.
I'm an old guy and I've been around youth sports since I was a youth. So that's, you know, I'm 60, almost 68. So I've been around youth sports for 63 years or so. I was 5 years old when I was first in Little League. And I've seen a little bit of a shift as to what people are looking for when they enter youth sports. I always felt that it was fun. It was the camaraderie. It was being with people. Didn't know it, but it was probably the lessons you learned by striking out to lose the World Series in Little League when I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, the lesson I learned from that I didn't ever want to be in that position again. I was going to get a hit next time.
Right.
And so
Get that tee out.
yeah, those were all the lessons you learned. The evolution that I've seen over these 5+ decades is that it seems like some of the focus is where am I batting in the order? Am I going to get a trophy? Am I going to make the travel team? Am I going to get a scholarship? Am I going to make the major leagues? I mean, we didn't think anything about the major leagues. We loved the Cleveland Indians. I grew up in Cleveland, but there was never a time where I was sitting there thinking, you know, I'm going to be a Cleveland Indian. That wasn't, and no one was telling me, hey, you ought to think about being a Cleveland Indian. I was just trying to take from youth sports what it had to offer. Our coaches, I know Mr. James and Mr. Baird, ironically, one was a plumber and one had a heating and cooling store. They weren't out there. Neither of them, you know, wanted their kid to. In fact, Mr. Baird's son didn't even have any kids. Mr. James had a couple kids, but you know, they were just like the rest of us. They might have batted 7th or, you know, whatever, and they didn't get any special. No, Mr. James wasn't living his life through his kids,
right?
You know, which you see a little bit,
mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think the values of group activity, I don't care if it's the marching band, the orchestra, the clubs of any kind, youth sports, if we veer off of what the values gained from them are and onto what rewards you can get from them from a material standpoint, I think we've gone down the wrong path. And right now, unfortunately, what you're seeing in youth sports is you see youth sports activity go until about age 13 and then it crashes.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what? We didn't go and have travel teams and play for 6 more weeks, or we didn't get private lessons coaches or go in batting cages in the winter, you know, and I think we've burned out our kids a little bit, and all of a sudden it's like they're at age 13, they haven't maybe evolved as the next Francisco Lindor,
right? And
they're like, you know,
there's not a love for the game,
no,
right?
They were kind of, you know, so do I think youth sports has evolved into maybe being less impactful as it maybe once was? Maybe. I have an old mentor who was a retired English professor from Georgia Southern, Dr. Spurgeon, and he's a kind of a Greek mythologist, Shakespeare guy, and he says, you know, there's in Shakespeare's 71st sonnet, it talks about consumed by that which nourished us. Well, Little League nourished us. Today we've gotten consumed by it. And he said that's exactly what was happening in the Shakespearean times. That's what he was talking about. The good life, which they had every once in a while, it kind of nourished them, gave them a little good taste.
Mm-hmm.
It consumed them.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of parallels the beginning of ESPN with all of a sudden, when I was growing up, the Buckeyes were only on once a year. By rule, you could be on 5 times every 2 years, including your bowl game. That was just the way it was. Well, in the early 80s, they deregulated TV.
Right.
You could be on TV all you want. ESPN had sports 24 hours a day. We kind of got latched to it. Even my kids, who were little, would watch Sports Center all the time. And so everything became highlights. Nothing about the journey, just the highlights.
Right.
And did we get consumed by that which nourished us, that which gave us value? And so Doc Spurgeon may be right, you know, like any other evolution of things. And I really think we could really get value if we took a good look at youth sports or youth activities of any kind, but youth dance. I mean, it's not just sports.
And shift the focus back on values. And what you mentioned a few minutes ago, the volume of media and content available to inspire and educate is also, it's positive and negative simultaneously.
That's right, yeah. Which one catches your attention? You know, and do you have a broad enough scope, and do you understand, you know, the old Stradivarius thing? Someone said, I would give anything to play the violin like you do. And he said, no, you wouldn't. I gave my life. I gave every day of my life.
Right.
So
hours and hours
yeah,
and hours.
And so do we understand what it takes to be successful? And I know, Jeff, since you've been here, you've been talking about the whole brain gain, and we've got to do a good job, and there's going to be opportunities. We've got to provide the workforce, you know, get the quality needed, and that's, to me, what we've got to figure out is how are we going to get folks thinking about, learning about the things that can be helpful down the road, and not just the things that we kind of like doing today.
The process versus the outcome.
Yeah.
Right, because that's really, and it goes back to the paper route, right? Do the work.
Yeah.
Do the work.
Right. People say, why do you set your alarm for 5:01 every morning? Well, I've been doing that since I was in 6th grade.
Right.
And you know, and that's just
a basic discipline.
That's what, you know, that's what you do.
Right. Right.
The Brain Gain is a collaborative effort, and we'd like to thank the headlining members of the coalition, including Sweeney Chevrolet Buick GMC, the Moransky Companies, and the Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition. Also included are Farmers Bank Group, Youngstown State University, Eastern Gateway Community College, the DeBartolo Corporation, Cortland Bank, MS Consultants, and 898 Marketing.
So speaking of, you know, the decades of experience you have in leadership, have you ever, share an example of maybe a leadership mistake and something that you learned from it and how it changed or impacted your ongoing behavior?
You know, one of the things I recall is we always wanted to know what was going through the minds of our players when we were coaching, because we knew whatever was going through their minds was going to affect their performance. And that's why we constantly wanted to evaluate. And we knew that the media was going to be either saying nice things or terrible things. Forget that. Let's evaluate where we've got to get better. And let's find out what you're thinking. And so we would always spend lots of time surveying them, asking them questions, getting a handle on where they were. I remember as we went through the 2006 season, we were really good. And from day one, we were ranked number 1 in the nation. All the way through the regular season, we were ranked number 1 in the nation. And we were very talented. Going into the season, I know we were thinking the right things, because the year before, we had a really good team, but we lost a game or two that maybe we could have won. And so our guys were really focused. And so we got to the end of the regular season, and the mistake I made was I could see we weren't thinking right. I could see we thought we'd arrived. But the approach we took to talk to them about it maybe wasn't as effective as it could have been. Part of me was like, gosh, you know, I hate to, you know, really get after these guys. I mean, they've shown, you know, they've done everything we've asked, you know, for this whole year. I mean, they've proven, you know, but I can see they're not preparing here over this 4 or 5 week bowl preparation, and you know, so I kind of vacillated. We tried to have some discussions about, are we thinking right? You know, they weren't as effective, but like any other mistake, the same thing happened in 1990 at YSU. We were undefeated and we got beat in the playoffs. That learning, that having our minds right, fueled us for the next 4 years. Mm-hmm. After we lost in 2006 in the national championship game there, that fueled us through the next year, which we probably weren't near as good. We had all kinds of guys graduate and so forth, but we were thinking right. And we went all the way to the national championship game. Probably had no business being there. We weren't that good of a team, okay? But we were thinking right. And even in that game, we lost to LSU. But, I mean, we were thinking right going into that game. We got ahead. We were playing well, made some mistakes. They were a good team. We didn't come up short in that game because we weren't thinking right. And you're going to come up short sometimes.
Right.
But the one that really, the real regret is when you know you didn't have to come up short, and had you been thinking right. So that made me even more focused on, what all of us are thinking, myself included. I mean, all of us can get, so we had a little acronym, WAYT. What are you thinking? That's going to be the key to the future. Think about our young kids in brain gain and so forth. What are you thinking? Are you thinking about, learning those values, the work ethic, those basics, or are you just thinking about, staring at your phone or this or that? And you sound like an old person when you say your technology, because I'm sure we had new technology that our parents didn't. But if it gets in the way of building your fundamentals, it's a problem.
How do you shift the thinking? Is it introducing paranoia into the equation? Andy Grove, founder of Intel, believed management and growth and innovation because he was paranoid, just constantly worried that someone's right over his shoulder trying to take over. I mean, that's hard to shift that mindset.
I think that's a reality that someone is always trying to find a better way.
Yeah.
We used to always talk about this book that we read as a team periodically, which was entitled "If It Ain't Broke, Break It." So why? Because people are going to get better at things. They're going to figure out your offense, or they're going to figure out how to attack your defense, or whatever. They're going to find better ways to get stronger and faster. And so, yes, I think the reality that it's a highly competitive world. I know when we were down at Oak Ridge National Labs, and we've been working on some projects with the DOE and the DOD, and they have their staff meetings at like 5:30 in the morning. And we said, why 5:30 in the morning? And they were very pragmatic. I wouldn't call it paranoid, very pragmatic. And they said, hey, we've got to innovate faster than China can copy. I mean, that's their reality.
Right.
So we're going to get at it.
Right.
And so I don't know if leadership through paranoia, in my mind, it's leadership through reality.
Right.
And how can you get people thinking properly? In my opinion, it's got to become their idea. I think the last thing we can do is tell people how to think. If we can kind of propose to them, here's the reality. Now, what do you think it's going to take for us to be successful? You come up with the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot more luck with the people who are going to have to do the plan, coming up with it, than me ever handing them the plan. And I know the people around here will tell you, I'm the guy that comes in and throws out ideas, but I don't ever come up with the plan.
Right.
Because I don't have I'm not coaching that department. I'm not working directly with that group of people. So for me to tell them how to figure it out, no, I might come up with some ideas. Some of them are silly and we don't do them. Some of them it's not a bad idea. But ultimately, it's got to become their idea as to how we can be successful.
Are there iterations within that planning process to, perhaps you do know what outcome you'd like, and perhaps you want to coerce, well, I don't want to say the word coerce, that seems kind of strong. That seems to violate the principle here, but is there a way to kind of encourage them down a path, or is it just a feedback loop? Or
Yeah, I think the general goals are easy to come up with. The more specific ones, I think, have to be elicited. But above all else, you have to constantly evaluate. That's where I think sometimes, I used to hate it when I would hear from a professor, your player hasn't been to class for 3 weeks. Why didn't you call me the first day? Because I could have nipped that in the bud. In fact, that happened to the point where I started hiring retired educators to be at the classroom buildings where my players were supposed to be. And I knew by 1 o'clock if a kid was ever missing class, because I knew he needed to be there. Now, he knew he needed to be at practice to play. Why didn't he think he had to be at class to be successful there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he liked football better. I get that.
Yeah.
So my job is to help him understand that we're going to evaluate that too. So constant evaluation, I think people are looking for. I think they get used to it, to the point where if they don't get evaluated for a moment, they want to know, hey, was that what we're looking for? And I think that's, part of the role of all of us that are trying to bring people along.
Right, right. So to bring our conversation to a close, what does our region need to continue to grow and evolve and to truly embrace the brain gain, which is, we'd like to keep our kids here and we'd like to bring a lot home and really help. We had a population outflow for decades, and with all of the great initiatives on the horizon, what do you think we have to do as a region to attract and retain our talent?
I think the good news is I don't think we're going to be short on opportunities. I think as the pendulum swings here, you can see what's going on. There are opportunities, and you don't have to live right where you work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that means we can have people living here with a tremendous quality of life midway between Pittsburgh and Cleveland, right midway between Chicago and New York City, that this is a spectacular location. Maybe not in January, but for the most part, you turn on the news, there aren't wildfires here, don't see hurricanes here, don't see crazy winters here, don't see a whole bunch of tornadoes every once in a while. There are so many reasons, there's infrastructure and so forth. So we've got the raw materials. I think we're going to have the opportunities. The question will be, will we have the modeling and example for the people that already live here, who I think are going to have to be the first one that are the brain gain. We've got to get more developed brains that are already here. We're not short on people. I know it's not a huge demographic area, but we're not short on people.
Right.
Okay.
750,000 people, if you really draw the circle up to Ashtabula, down towards West Virginia. I mean, that's...
Well, the circle I always draw is if you go Pittsburgh to Cleveland, it's 7 million. 7 million.
Right, right.
Within an hour of my campus, there's 7 million people. So don't tell me we don't have opportunities. We have to develop. Development starts at home. It starts with example. It starts with modeling. So as much of our efforts that are put toward the business community and the higher ed community and so forth, in my mind, the community that needs attention and brought along is the grassroots community. If we'll get development of the people that live here, there'll be opportunities. When opportunities then really excel, then I think when people start evaluating, hey, where's a good standard of living? Where are there good schools? Where's there good modeling going on? Where's stuff happening? Then I think you get the brain gain back from outside. But you better do it at home first.
Right, right. Yeah, aware of any exciting projects on the horizon that we should know about?
In terms of our opportunities?
Yeah, maybe something that we haven't covered in the press yet, but something.
Well, the one, I don't know if it's been in the press too much, but we were just on a call led by Jim Kinnick from Eastgate, and I don't read the press. I check my business journal highlights.
Right.
And outside of that, I'll catch the Vindicator, which isn't as developed as it once was, so you don't get quite as much information. So I don't know if this has been but the whole Lordstown hub modal thing, tying in LG Chem and Lordstown Motors and TJX and
right.
Anderson Dubose and Amazon, and creating a whole transportation modal. We were on a call, Jim Kinnick and John Malaterno and and oh gosh, who all was on the call? A couple guys from the Ohio Turnpike, from the Chamber, Guy Coviello, and we were with Senator Portman talking about this whole build grant from a transportation hub standpoint. That could be a transformational thing if we were fortunate enough. Sometimes you worry, that we just got a build grant, and
Right.
sometimes they, try to sprinkle them out. But for our location and for what's going on there, and with the induction charging for trucks going across the road, crazy stuff. But just the LG Chem and the Lordstown Motors and the Chill Can and the things that are going on, there's going to be enough opportunity. It's got to get developed. Doesn't happen overnight, especially big things. Little things happen quickly, but
Right.
big things that can be international, don't happen quickly. But we're going to have them happen. And again, I still go back. I am not worried about our opportunities. I'm worried about, will we have the people to take advantage of the opportunities?
Right. So to close, do you have a favorite leadership quote?
I look at leadership as not being a position, but it's the action that you take to serve others. I don't know if that's not really a leadership quote, but the quote that I think goes hand in hand with that, probably my favorite quote, is paradise is where I am. And so serving where you are is what's really important. Thinking about your first question at the beginning of this whole thing was, did you ever dream about as a child this or that? I dreamed about where I was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought growing up on the Baldwin Wallace campus with my dad making no money, getting a paper out so I could get some pieces of licorice occasionally or whatever, was paradise.
Right.
And that's where I wanted to. Now, did I have social media distracting me maybe that I should be somewhere else? I don't know. We had the newspapers and we had 3 TV stations, and but somehow, some way, I think we've got to believe that paradise is where I am. And doesn't mean paradise doesn't shift. I was an assistant coach at 5 different places. All 5 places were paradise for me. I was a head coach at 2 different places. One I didn't love more than the other. I mean, that was paradise. I was a vice president at Akron, and that was paradise. I've been a president here. This has been paradise. Who knows what another chapter will be, but I can assure you, whatever that is, that will be paradise, because I really believe that paradise is where I am.
It's a great place to end. President Tressel, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support of the Brain Gain.
It's critical.
Before we go, I'd like to thank members of the Brain Gain Coalition, especially our great sponsors. Without them, none of this would be possible. So a big thank you goes to Sweeney Chevrolet Buick GMC, the Moransky Companies, and the Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition. Thanks so much for their support. And also, please follow, like, and subscribe to this series on your favorite podcast player. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and connect with me on LinkedIn, one of my favorite places. You can find me over there at Jeff Leo Herrmann, and send me a message. I will see you next time.
I'm growing up in this life, and to the human that I need to be, I know that I am not alone. I'm brave, I got what it takes.